Hey, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include losing, finding, and remaining.
Wrong! What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all?
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you people?
Wrong! You do have to tolerate it. It's my show.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Lost! There's this old song from REM from like 30 years ago. It's called Losing My Religion. And I remember when it came out, I had a couple of friends, they'd be like, I don't like that song, it offends me, I don't want to hear it. And I'd say, why does that song offend you? And they'd say, I don't know, it just offends me. I don't like hearing somebody say they're losing their religion. And then I would explain that the song was about somebody who had lost the love of their life and they had treated this person like they were a god. And so the breakup was causing them, it felt like, that they were losing their religion. And I was completely wrong about that. That is not what the song is about. That's not what the phrase, losing my religion, is about. Nor is it about somebody actually losing their religion. The phrase is this southern phrase. And I'm originally from Oklahoma, but apparently that's not southern enough to know this phrase. And REM is from Savannah, Georgia. You know, that's deep south. And the phrase means that I'm so angry, the situation is stirring so much rage in me, I'm going to lose my religion. I'm going to lose my control. I'm going to do things that are inappropriate according to my religion. I'm going to lose my religion. So whatever you've been thinking about that song for the last 30 years, rearrange all of it. Issue number 2! Finding fault. I was on Threads. That's right, I was on Threads. I was using Threads because I don't know how to use the app formerly known as Twitter. However we're supposed to pronounce it, I don't know. But I was on Threads, and the thing with Threads is they show you a lot of stuff from people you don't know. And this guy, he was like, hey, there are people losing their jobs. There are Bud Light employees losing their jobs because people hate trans people. And these people would be fully employed, everything would be fine, except for all these hurtful, hateful people. And I had to interject. I had to interject. I know a thing or two about marketing. Just a thing or two. There are people who are way smarter than me. And apparently, the people at Bud Light thought they were smarter than me, and it turns out they were wrong. The reason that Bud Light employees are losing their jobs is because their bosses did a bad job. Their bosses didn't know what they were doing, and it hurt the company. In particular, the marketing executives at Bud Light didn't know what they were doing, and they took their eye off the ball and decided to market something else rather than cheap light beer to people. And what people who drink Bud Light really wanted was messages about how great the cheap light beer is. And they didn't want any other marketing message. But there's more to it than this. It's not just that they were sending the wrong message. I'm not a Bud Light drinker. I don't know much about Bud Light or beer in general. But from my understanding, Bud Light is not known to be a quality beer. It's not known to be a quality adult beverage from everything I've heard. And that has a lot to do with why people are going out of work at Bud Light. And let me just give you a very clean counterexample. Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Extremely political. They are extremely political. They don't hide their politics at all. And they are very left-wing. Much, much, much more left-wing than anything Bud Light was attempting to communicate to their consumers. Much more left-wing. Extremely left-wing. Bernie Sanders looks at the marketing and politics from Ben & Jerry's and says, whoa, that's a little too woke for me. And the reason Ben & Jerry's is still successful is because they sell a quality product. Everybody knows that Ben & Jerry's ice cream is really, really good. It's not the big, 5-gallon tub that you get, for a kid's birthday party just to give everybody some semblance of ice cream, right? No, it's like $5 for that little pint, for that little thing. Because it's such good ice cream, they can charge that much. They can charge way more than most ice creams charge for just a little bit, and they can use their platform to communicate all sorts of liberal left-wing ideas, and their sales are okay because they offer a quality product, and Bud Light does not. And I feel bad for all of the employees at Bud Light who've lost their jobs. Other jobs are going to be created by Modelo and Coors Light and Michelob and whoever else makes beer. Their sales are going to go up because people aren't drinking Bud Light, right? The beer sales are going to continue. The number of people drinking beer will continue. They'll just continue somewhere else. Somebody else is getting that job. That job was recreated somewhere else. I feel bad for the individuals who lost their jobs. It's not their fault, and it's not the consumer's fault. It's the people who ran the company who didn't understand what their product was and what kind of messaging they needed to send out in order to sell that product. If you've got cheap beer, doesn't taste very good, don't monkey around with anything else, right? Just get people to drink the beer however you can. So, dear Budweiser, if you don't want people to lose their jobs, hire me to just give you the most conservative marketing opinions ever. Just call me and say, hey, is this a good idea or a bad idea? And I'll just veto the bad ideas so that your employees don't lose their jobs. Hey, it's time. What are the rules?
Oh, what are the rules?
What are the rules?
What are the rules?
What are the rules?
This week's What Are the Rules is courtesy of the lovely Wendy. She's not here with us today. I know you're all very disappointed about that. I am not disappointed that she's not here because I actually know where she is in the house. She's just somewhere else. She's still with me. She's just not with you. But here's what the lovely Wendy wanted me to talk about. And this is her rant, but in the style of Tim. Here's her deal. Multiple people, over multiple times over the last several weeks, have been calling her and not leaving a message. Now, we are moving well past voicemail, right? Nobody likes voicemail. I totally get why you're not leaving a voicemail message. But here's what you need to do. You need to text or email and say, hey, I was calling about, and then you tell the person what you're calling about. Now, it's okay if you call and don't leave a message and don't send a text message if you're not expecting a call back. But these people who are calling the lovely Wendy are expecting her to call back. They follow up later and say, hey, did you see that you missed a call from me? And yes, she saw that she had missed a call from you, but you didn't tell her what you were calling about. There's lots of reasons not to call back. There's lots of reasons not to leave a message. Maybe you just had a quick question and you knew that she would have the answer. And when she didn't answer, you looked it up on Google or you asked somebody else. So the assumption is she doesn't need to call you back because you didn't say, hey, I need you to call me back. If you call somebody and don't leave a message, the onus is on you to follow up, not on the person who missed the call. So here's the rule.
Please leave your message after the tone.
Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@thewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, thewrongpodcast.com, and help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Let me tell you a quick story. Today, somebody I've known for 6 months, he's the youth pastor at my church. He goes, "You have a podcast? I didn't know you have a podcast." And I could blame it on myself that he doesn't know, but I don't go around telling everybody, "Hey, I've got a podcast. Nice to meet you. I've got a podcast." No, that would be weird, right? I mean, I could start doing that, but that'd be weird. That would generally be socially unacceptable. But clearly, all of our mutual friends let he and me down by not letting him know that I have a podcast. I blame you. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. I was wrong.
Okay, back to the comments from my listeners. My lovely, lovely listeners who raked me over the coals for my last episode. Raked me over the coals. The main complaint I got from people was concerning my opinion on Biscoff cookies. Biscoff. People apparently like these cookies, or whatever they are, these things claiming to be cookies. And they wanted me to know, no, I like these cookies. In fact, listener Ted sent me a photo from the Biscoff store at Pier 39 in San Francisco, where he visited the store immediately after hearing my rant about Biscoff cookies. That's how much he likes Biscoff. He didn't just take the free ones from the airline. He actually went and spent money at the store. Like, what the heck? What the heck? Okay, other things listeners had to say. This comment came from listener Michael. Michael said, "Can't usually find something wrong in the wrong podcast, but you did say 2 Corinthians 7:14 instead of 2 Chronicles 7:14. And he is absolutely right. I messed that up. I messed it up. I meant 2 Chronicles. 2 Chronicles. And that is a mistake that happened to me once before when I was in 4th grade, and I'm still embarrassed about it, and all those feelings came right back up to the surface. Thanks to you, Michael. Actually, it was my fault. Listener Eric, give yourself some space for this one, okay? Listener Eric writes in with some advice. Some public pronunciation tips from someone who cares and has been trying to help an individual for decades. The trick is different words have different techniques. Some words, like integralism, need to be said slowly, or the transitions between syllables, as he was saying, syllables, will trip you up. Second, other words, like Zoroastrian, need to be said quickly and almost slurred without stopping or commenting on the pronunciation. Listen, I'm going to be commenting on the pronunciation because I'm sitting here by myself talking into a computer microphone. I need to make the jokes up somewhere, right? Don't take that away from me. Back to Eric's comment. The third thing he had to say is the big problem is when you completely spell a word incorrectly in your mind, like when you say synchronism instead of syncretism. There's just no helping that. So you have to identify what kind of word you're dealing with, and you must decide in a nanosecond. Best of luck. Thank you, Eric. And just so you all know, just so everybody's clear on how this podcast is formed, there is no script. This is done without a script. So when I come upon the word Zoroastrianism, I should know better. I should put that in the script, right? Don't say Zoroastrianism. Go with Buddhism. Go with Hinduism. Much easier, right? Much, much easier. It's all coming up off the top of my head. And sometimes my head betrays me. Issue number 3. Give it up. As you might know, our President Joe Biden, he is 80 years old, and he is showing some signs of his age. There were some rather just strange or troubling comments that he made regarding the devastating fires in Maui. I think at one point somebody asked him about it and he said no comment. Like, what? No comment? And then he when he was comforting people in Hawaii about their loss, the loss of life, he went rambling on about this personal story about how there was a fire near his house that scorched the outside of his house and almost burned his garage. Like, dude, that's not a great story to tell. I get that you're trying to connect with people, and the easiest way to connect is personally through your own stories, but yeah, that's not a great story, like to tell people who've just lost everything, including their loved ones. Some other signs of his age, his aides are attempting to make sure that he only walks up stairs that aren't too vertically tall. Short steps. He needs short steps everywhere he goes. And, you know, like if you're running around trying to make sure that the staircase has short steps everywhere a person goes, not great. Not a great way to run for president. But Joe Biden, it's nothing. Because Senator Diane Feinstein, she takes the cake for this. Like, Joe Biden is in perfectly good health compared to Senator Diane Feinstein. She's a senator from California, and she's 90 years old. And let me just ask you a question. Have you ever been so tired at night that you can't go to bed? Like, you're just, you're watching The Tonight Show, and you're just so tired that you just have to continue sitting there. Like, it's just easier just sit there than to get up and walk to your bedroom and actually get a full night's sleep. You're just going to lay there on the bed and then wake up at 2:30 in the morning and then finally decide that it'd be more comfortable, right? That's happened to you, right? Senator Feinstein, she is too old to resign. Like, she doesn't have the physical or mental capacity to actually resign. She's too old to say the words, I resign. She can't do it. She's incapable. She's physically incapable. Go look up a photo of Senator Diane Feinstein right now. She is not looking good. And I'm not criticizing her. It's fine to get old. Fine. No problem. But you should not be holding on to an important job like U.S. Senator if you're too old to even say the words, I need to go lie down. Right? Like, not appropriate. And we have this age limit on public office. For example, to run for U.S. president, you have to be at least 35 years old. If we can have a minimum age requirement, there is no reason we can't also have a maximum age requirement, right? And this is not true of everybody, but for a large swath of people, cognitive decline really hits after the age of 80. That's not true of everybody. There's some really sharp, witty, spry 96-year-olds. I know that. I know the exception exists, but there's also some very capable 32-year-olds who are not allowed to run for president because of this age requirement that's put on top of everybody. So if we can do it for a minimum age, we should be able to do it for a maximum age. And my thought is, you can't run for president after the age of 76. You can run at 76. You can't run after that. So if your first term starts when you're 77 or 76, you can't run again when you're 80. If your second term would start when you're 78, you can't run again because you would be 82 at the end of your term. And we could adjust that for senators and congressmen based on their terms of service, but you get the general idea. This is, and I know that I'm trying to fix a problem that's right in front of us right now concerning Joe Biden and all the other baby boomers who won't give it up. Like, nobody saw this coming with baby boomers, right? That they would just be unwilling to give up their positions of power. And I say that as a Gen Xer, like all Gen Xers who are being overlooked and overshadowed by baby boomers all their life, because baby boomers won't give it up, and we will not get a chance. We will not get a chance because by the time they actually do, we Gen Xers will be too old to run for office. We'll be too tired, and the millennials and the Zoomers will take over. And I just want to fix this for anybody else in the future. There's no fixing it for Gen X. We're screwed. Now, I bring all this up because there is an organization that is well known for having a gerontocracy, and that is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You may know them as the Mormons. And their current prophet and president, his name is Russell M. Nelson, and in just a couple of weeks, probably 10 days after you are able to listen to this podcast, he will turn 99 years old. Before him, the prophet and president, his name was Thomas S. Monson. He died in office at the age of 90. Before him was a gentleman by the name of Gordon B. Hinckley. He served until he turned 99 years old. And just a couple weeks after turning 99, he finally passed away. The next president, it's predetermined, the next president of the LDS Church, his name is Dallin H. Oaks, and he is currently 91 years of age. So at minimum, he's taking over when he's 91. And this problem of mental decline has affected the LDS Church on numerous occasions. There's been many stories over the years of prophets and presidents of the church who are basically just sitting at their desk slobbering. Like they can't be there. Like somebody has to actually sign their name for them. They're incapable. They're in hospital beds and they're continuing to serve. The organization is missing a leader because they haven't resigned. The only way apparently out of this position is to die. And that's not true. That's not the only way out. Let me give you one example of how this problem has affected the LDS Church. Thomas S. Monson, as you might have noticed, I always include the middle initial of their names. And that is just a weird quirk of the LDS Church that everybody in authority has their middle initial mentioned by name when they're named. And they don't have to do that, but they do. And the reasons are because they had a Joseph F. Smith and a Joseph Fielding Smith, and they needed to keep them clear. And so everybody since, even though they don't have similar names, have their middle initials mentioned for whatever reason. I guess it sounds more dignified to them. That's how you know that this person is important. We mention their middle initial. So Thomas S. Monson, he was serving as the president and he was out of it. Like he was seriously old. He could not take care of himself, much less run a huge international church. And he was presiding over a meeting, and I say presiding because that's all he was doing. He was there. He presides. But he wasn't really part of the conversation. This is information that it's kind of leaked out from the church. But there was this conversation about what to do in the church with the rising acceptance of homosexuality. What should they do in their church about homosexuality? And someone suggested, hey, I know what we should do. We should make it so that the children of homosexual couples can't be baptized in our church. And as long as they're minors, they're not allowed to be baptized. And that will help us, I guess the thinking was that will help us keep homosexuals out of the church or help us punish homosexuals. We'll take it out on the kids. We'll make sure that they do not participate in the blessings of baptism by our church. And there was some discussion about this, and all of a sudden, Thomas Monson, who was largely incapacitated at this point, he perked up and he said, "This is the will of the Lord." And then he fell back asleep or whatever. And, he might have just been saying it out of habit. Like, this is the kind of thing he was supposed to say in meetings. And he just perked up long enough to say it in regards to this conversation. And in the LDS Church, when the prophet speaks, the thinking has been done. You can't disagree with the prophet in their church. He said that this is what they should do, and so they did it. They rolled out this exclusionary policy that prevented children, if they wanted to be baptized, if their parents were homosexual, the church would not baptize them. And as a Christian, I'm flummoxed by this, but I am not a Latter-day Saint, so, it's your religion. If it makes sense to you, I guess you need to do it. And they did for a number of years until Thomas Monson passed away and Russell M. Nelson took over. And then they redacted this policy and made it so that children could be baptized once again. Now, what is strange about this situation in the LDS Church of men serving well into their late 90s and then not being able to leave office until they die, there's nothing scriptural about this for the LDS. There's nothing scriptural. This is just their practice. It's their custom. It's a policy. It could be easily changed. They could allow people to resign, but nobody does out of custom, out of tradition. And the reason it's like this, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you why it's like this. And it starts with Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith, he was killed by a mob when he was 38 years old. And nobody was expecting him to die at that age, especially Joseph Smith. And he had not communicated to anybody about what was supposed to happen after his death. He didn't lay it out for anybody. Who leads the church if Joseph Smith dies? Now, he had some casual conversations with a number of people, but he didn't make it clear. He didn't make it explicit. He didn't write it down for anybody so they could say, hey, here's the paper that proves, here's the prophecy that proves that I'm supposed to be the leader now. Let me explain a little bit about how leadership works in the LDS Church. They have their prophet. He's the guy in charge. He's the president of the church, and he's in something called the First Presidency. And along with him, he has two counselors. He has the first counselor. Guess what the second counselor is called? That's right. He's called the second counselor. So the president of the church, his first counselor, and his second counselor. In addition to those three men is something called the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So there's 12 apostles, so there's 15 men. The three members of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Are you guys writing this down? 12 plus 3 equals 15. In the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, there is someone who is the president of the Quorum. And this man at the time was Brigham Young. And Brigham Young was the president of the Quorum because he was the longest serving apostle at the time who wasn't in the First Presidency. So, Joseph Smith dies, and he's got these two counselors in the First Presidency, right? They should become the next president and prophet of the church, right? That's what most of us would do. Okay, you got the president, well, then the vice president takes over. Well, the second counselor, he was William Law, and William Law is the reason Joseph Smith died. William Law broke away from the church because Joseph Smith approached he and his wife, and Joseph Smith said, hey, I want to marry your wife. And William Law was having nothing to do with it. So he left the church, he forms this rival Mormon church, and he produces this paper telling everybody about the reality of polygamy within the LDS Church at the time. And it was largely secret, nobody knew about it, and Joseph Smith wanted it to remain secret. And so Joseph Smith destroys the printing press and gets arrested for it, and that is what leads to his mob death in a different town. So William Law's out, right? Second counselor gone. Already had started his own rival church. Sidney Rigdon was the first counselor of the First Presidency, and Rigdon was not participating in polygamy either. In fact, Joseph Smith had approached Rigdon's daughter about becoming a plural wife, and Rigdon's daughter had turned him down. And so Rigdon wasn't cool with this polygamy thing happening either. Most of the leadership was involved in polygamy. And so Rigdon, he's not going to work for them, right? Because he's going to get rid of the polygamy thing that they've already all accepted. So Rigdon gets excommunicated by some other leaders of the church, and he turns around and he excommunicates everybody else in the church. And he eventually moves to Pittsburgh and starts his own rival Mormon denomination. And he claims that he's starting the true Mormon church, as did William Law. Both of them claimed that they had the true church. So Joseph Smith, he has a son at the time. His name is Joseph Smith III, and he was 12 years old. Not quite old enough to lead a church, right? And The thinking is the historical record probably best supports the case that Joseph Smith III was supposed to become the next prophet. But he was too young, and the leaders of the church didn't really like his mom, Emma, because she was opposed to polygamy. And so nobody was going to wait around for 6 years or 10 years for Joseph Smith III to become of age, old enough to run the church. They needed something to happen. The church was in crisis in the moment. They couldn't wait. Well, along comes this man, William Strang. He was somebody who was serving the church elsewhere as a missionary. He hears that Joseph Smith has died. He says, hey, I've got a letter from Joseph Smith saying that I'm supposed to be the next prophet of the church. And he comes bearing this letter with Joseph Smith's signature on it that claims that he is, in fact, the next leader. The problem is that nobody really accepts this letter. It was most likely forged, and it might have been proven to be forged at some point over the years. But that doesn't stop Strang. He starts his own rival church and says, no, I've got the real church. And Joseph Smith's widow, Emma Smith, along with a number of other people, join William Strang. And the main thing Strang has going for him is that he's opposed to polygamy for a time. Later, he's like, hey, you know what? That polygamy thing was kind of cool. And he starts polygamy himself. And in his Mormon sect that he starts up in Wisconsin. So that leaves the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. What are they going to do? Well, Brigham Young gets up and he gives this speech. He gives a number of speeches. One of them is why Sidney Rigdon shouldn't be the president of the church. And one of them is about why he should be the leader of the church. And he is practicing polygamy. And the other members of the Quorum of the 12, most of them are also practicing polygamy. And they're like, yep, we like what Brigham Young had to say. So from now on, we're going to say that whoever is the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles is the new president of the church. So Brigham Young becomes the prophet. He moves the church out to Utah. And what you need to know what's happening with the LDS church in the moment is things are kind of chaotic in the United States. But in England, their missionaries are killing it. They are sending converts over by the boatload. And part of how they're sending converts over is that there's a recession happening. There's an economic recession happening in England. And the LDS missionaries, you can see their missionary tracts from the time. They're basically selling real estate. They're saying, hey, we've got land for you. You just come on over, join our church, and we will give you a parcel of land. And people who were largely agrarian at the time, they needed land to grow their own crops. They're like, great, I'm going to go to the United States and join this church and get some land. So people are coming over from England, not really even knowing what's going on. And as they're coming over, the church is moving to Utah. They're like, hey, you almost got here. You made it to Missouri, or you made it to Illinois. We're actually going to keep going to Utah. And so all these people follow to this new territory that the LDS church is setting up, both for their church and as a separate colony. They've got both functions, the church function and the civil function happening. And Brigham Young is in charge of both. And he is a rather effective leader. Pretty smart guy, really, really smart on how to organize people and how to grow a community. Now, several years later, after Brigham Young has taken charge, somebody writes this letter. They write this thing that says, Brigham Young got up and he spoke to us all, and he took on the appearance and demeanor of Joseph Smith. And that is how we knew that he was the one God wanted to lead the church. Now, what's interesting about that letter is after it was written, everybody started repeating it. It was on the tip of everybody's tongue. Oh yeah, Brigham Young looked like Joseph Smith. Brigham Young really, really, really looked like Joseph Smith. What's peculiar about it is many people wrote stuff down in their journals, in whatever papers were necessary, in the meeting minutes about that meeting where Brigham Young claimed that he should be the leader of the church. Nobody in those contemporary records said anything about how he took on the appearance and demeanor of Joseph Smith. In fact, the person who wrote that wasn't even in the meeting. She wasn't there. We have records about where she was, and she wasn't at the meeting. But this became the justification that the culture of the church accepted. That, yes, we know that Brigham Young is the right man because he miraculously took on the appearance and demeanor of Joseph Smith. So, when the LDS Church nominates a 91-year-old man to become the president of the church sometime in the near future, they are reaffirming all of the decisions that put Brigham Young in place to begin with. And if they change that, then they're kind of undermining all the reasons and justifications that put Brigham Young in charge of the church to begin with. So they perpetuate it. It continues to go. And if you wait until you're 91 to finally become the president and prophet of God's one true church, are you going to give that up because you're tired? No, this is your chance. And nobody else has ever retired. Everybody always dies. So that's what I'm going to do as well. And so that is why the LDS Church has a 98-year-old man running things. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know. And let me know why. I had fun. I hope you did too. Bye-bye.